I'm your host, the Genie, and today I have kind of a personal topic. Today I'm just going to talk about the vision of Gatekeeper, where it's going. We have a lot of things planned as far as podcast topics and stuff like that. Unfortunately, it's been hard to get our co-hosts out. They're pretty busy with work and things like that. But I figured since they're not here, I'd take this episode to sort of just like talk about the vision, who I am, and kind of things like that. So I'll just kind of hop right into it. So first of all, like who am I? So for a lot of people, especially if you're just like looking at Gatekeeper as an outsider and not as a member of the community, you're gonna probably have like no idea who I am. And anyway, yeah. So my name is Stevenn. I go by Genie in the Gatekeeper community, and that's based on the character I play. And I created the game. Um, so with that being said, I think you can potentially some of my background might go into the game as you might know it. So growing up. My dad is a minister, and because of that, there's a couple things that I think sort of made this game come to life. And just as a disclaimer, like this part of the podcast is unscripted. I'm kind of going off the noggin here. I have notes for everything I'll say after I introduce myself, but just to get that just to make that known. But anyway, yeah. So my dad was a minister, and that has affected my life in probably a lot of ways. But the first way I was gonna say is I do have a more conservative, lean personality. I have an interest in tradition, character archetypes, or just personality archetypes, morality, things of that nature. So like when I think about, and obviously Gatekeeper is not necessarily a narrative at this point, but there are, if you go to the website, stories and stuff that you can start to read, but nothing that's ever been finished or anything. But a lot of that, a lot of religion on the man-made aspect, on the human side of it, has, as far as traditions and things like that go, have really been quite the impact, or really feel kind of important to me in a lot of ways, without going too deeply into that. So that might be obvious or come up when as Gatekeeper gets developed further and further. But aside from that, I'm also fairly creative, and that comes mostly from my mom. My mother was a singer, and I think, and my grandfather, my grampy is what we call him in Canada. He is a painter. I mean, it wasn't like his full-time job or anything, but he does paint. So from that side, there is a lot of artistry, and now it's nothing like insane. I think my mom is I don't know. Actually, I don't know the full extent of where my grandfather's taken his art, but I know my mom has written like a lot of music. I don't. She's never gone fully professional with it, but she's always done music. I think now she's writing music for the church. So creativity has been a huge part of my life because of my mom, and going forward, I've kind of had these two sides to me. I've had this sort of structured, conservative, traditional side, and I've had this artistic and free-flowing and expressive and emotional sort of side. And I really feel like I do have like a very good balance of both of them. And as I got older, when I got into high school, a lot of this will kind of come into place. So Anyway, so I went to public school, pretty much my entire for most of my adolescent life, being 6th grade through 10th grade, and in that time, and then even before that, so I think 2nd grade through 10th grade, I was in public school, and being as my dad being a pastor and as being as Christian as we were in church a lot, and that universe of church life was a lot different than school life. And there's a, I mean, there's so much I could say about that dichotomy, but when I got older, I felt like I did not like who I was becoming because of public school, and a lot who I was surrounded with, and also, if we're being honest, I felt that I couldn't. I felt like that the public school was much more competitive, and it was hard to always be in that competition. Like I could never be the best athlete or the best whatever it is, because there was just too much competition. And so part of me was like, well, it'd be nice if I could just go somewhere and not have to worry about that. So with those thoughts being in my head, I wanted to go to private school. And there's a lot that kind of there's actually more to it than that even went into that decision. But ultimately, I ended up going to private school. And at private school, this is where I met a lot of my friend group that I still hang out with today. So on the screen, if you're watching the YouTube video, you can see my friend Ethan. So Ethan's my best friend growing up. And then I had another friend at school, Alex. He was my best friend at school, and he lived across the street from me, stuff like that. So I had those two best friends. But other than them, there wasn't a lot of people that I was like super close to. The rest of my friend group came or stemmed from my time in private school. So I go to private school, and all of a sudden, I think there was a lot that changed. First, number one, that I think that competition aspect, I was very correct about that. Like the competition was just gone. Now everyone's hanging out together. It doesn't matter if you're an athlete or you're kind of a nerd or if you're into anime or whatever. Like everybody's hanging out. And even that comment, oh, if you're in anime, I felt like back then people who in public school, people who were really into anime, I felt like kind of got made fun of a little bit or clowned on. But now I'm hanging out. Now I'm kind of forced to hang out with people like that, people who I probably would have honestly made fun of when I was in public school, and now I'm oh geez, these if you didn't hang out with, they're all friends. There's only 16 kids in your class in the entire grade, so you have to be friends. You have all your classes together. So it was it changed my perspective a lot on sort of the social hierarchy of who's cool and who's not cool. So I basically learned to get along with everybody, which was a good thing, frankly. But the competition aspect, I think, and I won't go too deep into this, but the competition aspect was actually losing that was kind of a big deal. And what I mean by that is a lot of my friends from public school tried to make something of themselves, as far as not to say that not going to college is not making something of yourself, but they're I guess just a little bit more ambitious. They were really trying to I have a friend who is in missile defense, and I guess they're doing coding missile launch patterns or something along those lines. I'm probably way off, but that's the realm they're in. And I have a lot of other friends from that era of my life when I was in public school who were doing so many crazy things. And I know that not everyone who goes to public school is successful, but it's just the point is that there was a sort of an iron sharpens iron situation. I'll give a better example. in sports were way harder. Not just because there was more people, but because people tried harder in public school. Like if you have all these people who've played soccer their whole life, like, well, not only are they going to be better, but they're just like, they're literally trying harder because they're trying to get into college and they're trying to like be the best on the team and they're trying to, and so there's a toxicity that comes with that because then they're like, well, people who they're kind of making fun of the kids who are bad, and if they're better than someone, that like gives them gives them some sort of right in their head that they can like be a jerk. And that was like for me was part of the reason why I was leaving, that part of it. But then when I went to private school, now all of a sudden we don't try as hard to look good at school. We don't dress as nice. We don't take care of ourselves. We don't people don't work out as much. They're not staying in shape. There's and then when we went to college, a lot of my friends from there, and these are, I mean, well, I'll say that in a second, but I mean, they all kind of just went in the trades and, did never moved away from home and stuff like that. Now, that being said, I don't want to, I don't mean that in a bad way. I think there's obviously a trade-off here. So it's like some of the best guys I've ever met and some of my closest friends ever all were at this school. So it's like there is a level of character and honesty and things like that. Things that you would say probably like really matter that those guys all have that the guys in public school, maybe not the ones I'm friends with, but just in general, like I didn't see that a lot of that in public school. Like I think in public school, like I felt like we made fun of each other at lunch. Like we'd at a lunch table, we'd all like kind of bully each other at that. We just make fun of each other. Now it was all good fun in the moment, but like, we were genuinely kind of saying hurtful things, or we were saying hurtful things about other people. When I got to private school, I remember I like tried to say a joke that I would say at public school, and all of my friends, all the good people at my lunch table in the private school were like, "Oh, we don't say jokes like that. Like that would be mean." Like there's people who are at the lunch table who would not. So it was like that's like a big thing. So it's like, well, so there's obviously a trade-off here. It's like, this iron sharpens iron thing is really great when it comes to like, how we push ourselves to in our careers and things like that. But there is something to say about, on this other half where people are more casual, they're probably happier. There's also like there's a lot to it. Anyway, there's a lot you can go into there, and I think people I know on both sides are pretty happy with their decisions. I think as far as where they're ending up in life, and on both ends, people are I would call successful, in by like American standards, but like I do think it's like an interesting comparison, and for me what it did is it gave me the perspective of both, that probably will come into play later on in my story, and I won't really get into that, but I do find it very important for me to find a balance between sort of pushing to be the best at things, and just like that sort of like grind set is like the way we would say it, and also like surrounding yourself with friends and having a good time and just sort of like enjoying life day to day and not always trying to be working all the time, and which I right now I personally find myself doing all the time. I feel like I'm always like right now I'm like working a lot, and that was like part of it. But when I was in school in college, which I still am in college, I spent half my college years in a public school, a big university that was very competitive, and half of it at home in a small one. And it was very like, it was kind of that same vibe I was just giving off. So I've really have done both. And that kind of comes into my philosophy, and that'll kind of come into the game as I described. So going forward, I'm at the school, and I was confronted. We were confronted with like just a really strict. It was just really strict school, which is funny because we're all so like we were all so behaved. Like compared to public school, like nobody misbehaved. Like it wasn't even a thing. Like there's some like funny, like weird stories of people doing stuff, but it's like nothing compared to the stuff that you find in public school. So it's just not. It's not comparable. Anyway, so we are sitting there in at lunch, and we decided to play Magic the Gathering, and Magic the Gathering, of course, it got banned. It got banned from the school. So we described this in a documentary a little bit, but just going more in depth with it, it's like, so the game got banned. Magic the Gathering did, and I think specifically because the middle schoolers, it wasn't even because of us. It was because the middle schoolers were playing it, and one of those kids had like a deck full of demon cards, which is like, why would you have a deck full of demon cards? Like you're just asking for the game to get banned at a private Christian school. So all right, we gotta make a new game. So my friend Zach Pachin, he was like, okay, bro, like me and you, like let's both try to make a game, and we'll kind of just like try them both, and we'll try them at lunch with the rest of our friends. So we go out, and we both came up with things. So for my side of the story, you can kind of you can watch the documentary if you really want to know everything. But basically, I took 2 pieces of paper, folded them into squares, and then made like the 8-sided star shape, and I drew some paths on it, and then, I made what was like the first version of Gatekeeper. Zach never made a game ever. So, and in fact, I think the reason he didn't, because I remember him coming out and be like, no, this game, like, whoa, you already made a game, like, pretty cool. And then that was just it. He's just like, okay, yeah, probably not going to make a game anymore. So he's just decided, like, I made the game already, so we were just going to do that one. Anyway, so I was the only one who made a game. We go forward. We're playing at lunch. The game was, everyone liked the game. We changed the theme to a fantasy theme. Game got banned. So, and then, of course, I created and got banned by the teacher, Mrs. Cheek. Mrs. Cheek, then we created another version of the game, or I did, where because it got banned for having a wizard in the game who uses magic, the new version of the game, every character uses magic now. And then the goal of the game was to no longer become the gatekeeper, but to kill the gatekeeper. And then when you kill the gatekeeper, you you win. And the gatekeeper was Mrs. Cheek, and metaphorically. So it was kind of it was made out of rebellion from this sort of religious, I guess, what would you call it? Legalism is what we call it in the Christian world. So we have this so now we have this game where and we played it at the school retreat, which again we weren't supposed to have it there. But we played it there at the school retreat for the first time. Everyone had a really good time, and we're like, all right, we got to bring this over to like your house and play, or my house. So then we started going to my house and playing, and we'd all get really hype and play. So I think so there's something interesting about this like hypeness, and there's a couple other actual interesting things that go into this actually as well. So the denomination of, I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly, but of Christianity that my dad is a pastor of, is Assembly of God, which is a Pentecostal or charismatic denomination. So, which basically means we speak in tongues and believe in like miracles of the Holy Spirit and stuff like that. So growing up, and Ethan would attest to this, we both grew up going to like what we call them revival services, which are basically just like super exciting services where it gets like, we hype them up for probably weeks or even months beforehand. and we have like a special guest speaker come in, and then we we just worship God. And like the guy preaches, and miracles happen and stuff like that. And like, you can that I mean all that's I could probably do a whole talk on all that stuff, and like talk about my experiences seeing like what all that meant and enticed. But what it did is it introduced us to hype as like just as a crowd, not a spiritual, not even necessarily in a spiritual way, but there was just always a lot of hype around us. We were always going to conferences where like we go to what is it, was it like the youth conventions and camps, where there were just getting a bunch of teenagers getting really loud at the time for Jesus. But then that energy that we had, like that was just, or that energy that was being put into this stuff was kind of something that we embodied, and was kind of a part of like I don't know, it was like a thing. Like you go to an event, you get hype. Go to an event, and get hype. And I'm sure people who aren't Christian like have things like this, but like for me, this is where it came from. So that's where the idea of like getting hype came from. And then moving forward, or even more than that, when I was a kid, my dad was a youth pastor. So like when I was even younger, and my dad's youth group was like pretty sweet. In fact, what they did is they had like a normal youth service at like 7 o'clock or something like that, and then from 8:30 to like 11 o'clock at night, everyone just hung out. So literally, like they just had like 200 teenagers just hanging out, and like so I remember they had pizza, foosball. I don't know. I mean, that sounds kind of lame now I say it, but like video games and stuff, and like dodgeball. There were skateboarders, people playing wall ball. There was a lot of stuff happening. So it was pretty fun. And I mean, I was a little kid like walking around, so it was probably even cooler than me as a little kid. But in the trenches back then, so this is early 2000s, and the teenagers were all really into Super Smash Brothers Melee. And Super Smash Brothers Melee, this is like in the early days of King Ken. Like Ken was the best player at the time, and like this is so anyway. So I remember we'd go to youth group, and me and my friend Nigel would play while all the youth teenagers were in the service, would play Smash Brothers, and it was like pretty. I don't know. It was pretty cool. So I got really into Smash Brothers. I had a GameCube, and an N64 before that, and we played. And anyway, I grew up playing Smash Brothers with the teenagers in the youth group, and they would like come to our house and we'd play and stuff like that. So it was pretty sweet. So we did that for years, and then it sort of became part of. It was just a big. So that kind of became like a big thing for me. And then when I got older, I think it was 20. I mean, it was a long time ago, but what year was it? It might have been 2016. I may have been before that, but I went to Canada because my mom's side of the family is from Canada. And we went up to when we were up there, I think it was, I don't know exactly what was going on, but I basically ran into the Super Smash Brothers Melee documentary, which was made back, like it was years after the game came out, and so this is like literally probably 12 years after when I used to play it as a little kid. So I ran into this documentary online, and I spent every night of because it's like an 8-hour long documentary, every single night of the of this vacation in Canada, like watching this documentary. And of course, the only reason I'd watch it is because of that my time in my dad's youth group and stuff. And the guys in the Super Smash Brothers Melee community gets super hype, and you can watch, like, if you aren't into Super Smash Brothers Melee, you can watch it. You can like look up tournaments and stuff, like top 10, like most hype moments in the Super Smash Brothers history, something like that, like most hype plays, and it's just like really crazy, just big comebacks and like, different things like that, where someone beats someone or does a combo or does something that's unexpected, and then all the guys just go crazy. So this was sort of amongst growing up with this sort of like Christian hype stuff happening. The first time I was kind of seeing hype happen outside of my like out in the world, I guess. And this was like real. It was just pure hype. And I think the thing about it that's interesting is like, I think people get hype with sports, but I almost feel like it's a little bit different. It's not completely different, but it is a little different. Like when I used to play soccer, I remember my friend Adrian scored against in the region, or what was it called? Not in sectionals, I think it's called, and our in a sectional game, and we were playing a team that was better than us, and he scored, which I think put us in the lead, and I think we won because of it. And like everybody went crazy, but the feeling's not exactly the same, because I think the reason, I'm not exactly sure why it feels different, but it felt a little bit different now, but it was similar at the very least. But I think the thing that makes it mostly different is like, maybe because I was just at the time, because this was varsity, and I was on varsity, but didn't like the varsity guys, and I refused to play, and because of that, my skill level probably wasn't as high as it could have been. Anyway, that's another long story, but the I just watching from the sidelines was different, because it was like something that it wasn't something that was like attainable, I guess. It felt like something that like watching the Super Bowl, right? Okay, like I guess that's a good example. Watching the Super Bowl and watching like a game-winning Hail Mary, that's something that only the players of that game can experience. Nobody else can experience that. And it's like this like elite, I don't know, it's just like just this crazy like upper echelon of people. And what I was seeing was, I think with gaming, with like the Smash people and Smash tournaments, was that these are regular people who are doing something that they can get hype about. So it was like, I was like, it basically brought it down to earth and made it attainable. And then on top of that, I think it's not commercialized as much. It feels more authentic. Maybe and maybe that's what it is mostly. Now that I'm thinking, because I'm kind of thinking out loud here. So now that I so maybe disregard what I've said about sports and stuff, because I'm gonna re-say it in a way that I actually agree with. But essentially, I think that with things like the Super Bowl, and even in my high school soccer game, it felt like it was slightly disingenuous, in that football, they pump millions of dollars, and there's all these advertising, there's these people at the game who don't even care about football, they're just there for the status quo of it all. And there's all these people are going with their families, like, and their families don't even care. Like, it's kind of like, not to say that people at the Super Bowl don't care, but it's like they don't really understand. Like, in Smash Melee, everybody going crazy understood what happened, because the only people who would go to a tournament are people who spend all their time playing Smash Brothers. So there was like a level of like, what that guy did was so sick, and we all know it. It wasn't just like it looked kind of sick. It wasn't just like, I mean, there is a lot to it, but it's like, It's like, it is sick. We all know how he did it, but we can't actually do it. And it's like, that's a lot different than something like even like soccer for me, because it was like that's how I felt when Adrian scored that goal. But I know for a fact, because like I knew how to do what he did. Like I knew how to score the goal, but I just would have missed it. It would have taken me more shots. But I know what he did, and the hype came from that number one, from the stakes, but number two, the appreciation of what was going on. And like in the crowd, I'm like looking at the crowd, and I know like none of our parents know this stuff. They just care about the team. So I think that's what it is. There's a slight disconnect. Not to say it's less meaningful, but there's a slight disconnect when the hype is the people getting hype or the mass majority of people getting hype don't know what's happening or don't understand what's happening. But when everybody in the room like understands it, and it's part of like, and there's sort of that, and they know each other too, because it was such a close knit community. So like the way my team felt, you know what I mean? It's like we had that kind of close knit relationship, kinda, but like not with the fans. Like the fans don't know us. Like the people on the stands don't know us. The people in the Super Bowl don't like. I mean, because I'm not sure how close an NFL football team is with each other, but the people in the crowd don't know anything that personal about those people. So when with going back to the Smash Brothers, like they're super close knit. They all are super close. They're super like they all know what's happening very well. They understand the situation, and at the very least, with the close knit community aspect, it was something that I felt was inspiring. So now I'm going to private school. We have all the boys together, and I also, and this is an interesting thing, I was like very, I don't want to say like, I don't want to call myself romantic, but I was just really into having like a high school sweetheart back then. And I just wanted to have a high school sweetheart, and it was like a huge value for me. But then I had one. Then I had a girlfriend. And then I was kind of like, well, now what? So that was and that was probably a big reason of why, like, when I was in public school, why I didn't get as close to my friends as I could have, because I was like more concerned with getting a girlfriend that I didn't even really care about my friends that much. Like I was basically a simp. And when I had a girlfriend and I was like, oh, like girls are just people. Like we're all just people. Then I was like, okay, I honestly, just, I'm gonna start hanging out with the boys. And so I started making friends. And so amongst that close knit community started to form. So here we are, that we're forming this close knit community. I'm there. This is a place that is very casual and fun loving, and I'm bringing in sort of a spirit of competition with this game, which is something that I'm just saying, like just honestly, I don't feel like the school is that competitive, or like the sort of the way people acted wasn't that competitive, and we're kind of acting out in a pit of rebellion, which was exciting for us because we were all very religious. And we didn't feel like we were doing anything wrong because it wasn't actually anything bad. Like we were just playing a game. But like it still kind of gave us that feeling of rebellion without actually having to do something that was actually like harmful. So we're all going to come to my house. We're all being rebellious. We're all going to be competitive for the first time in their lives. Well, maybe not in their lives, but you know what I mean. And we're coming from this place of, like we're people who know how to get hype, because we get hype for Jesus on a regular basis. And I have built this game with the intention of, and I've kind of skipped one other part. Before Gatekeeper was created in the fall, when I was on in the private school soccer team, we had, and I didn't have Gatekeeper parties. I had Smash Brothers parties. So that's what I would. That's the point of that story I was bringing up. We would come. I'd get people to come to my house to play Smash Brothers, and my thought was is like, well, if we all play Smash Brothers, we'll get hype. The problem is that we weren't good at the game. And no matter how much we played, we weren't getting better or we weren't getting good enough to get hype. So there was kind of a falling flat there. But we still had a good time. And we were still hype. It wasn't like the videos. So when I made Gatekeeper, we went from getting these hype Smash tournaments to now this hype having the same atmosphere around a board game, along with all the other things that were going into it. So, of course, it was hype. And not only was it hype, it was just, I wouldn't say like, I thought on purpose, like, let me make it hype. But once let me make a game that's hype. But once it was hype, then the thought is, okay, how do we make it more hype? And that's where we came up with the rule was, the hypest option always wins. So no matter what happens, and this is basically how it works. So I came up with a very basic set of rules. Roll the dice, attack the gate by rolling the dice, rolled 50-50. And then that continued when we made the bigger version of the game, which is the version we play today. And with all that, anytime there was a discrepancy, like, oh, what do we do here? Like, for example, what do we do when, okay, like, we were like, okay, when you capture a gate, can you use your initial bonuses every turn, or not every turn, but can you use your initial bonuses on whoever you want to, or do you have to roll? And we were like, well, you can do it whoever you want to because that's more hype, we thought. And you can just go down the line. It's like, when you collect 3 dragons, can you do a big roll? Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet if we could. Like, I think I even remember it was like, okay, so you collect dragons and you can, like, turn them in. What if we had a roll that you can turn in multiple of them for, and we can call it, like, something crazy, like a dragon roll? That's what I mean. So we come to these places where we didn't know what to do, or we'd have an idea, and we would make rules based on whether or not it was hype. So what follows is a series of extremely hype matches. And it had that formula that I was talking about before. Like, we all knew what was going on for the most part. And maybe, we all knew we knew what was going on. But we were also a super close-knit community. We've been doing these parties for a year. Like, for an entire year, and then up to 2 years once by the end of my senior year. So it was just a lot of hype for like 2 years, and we just, I don't know. I mean, that's what it is. So, with all that being said, Gatekeeper was just built on that is, I think that's like a lot of the elements that went into Gatekeeper. Moving forward from there, there was just the thought of, I think a lot of people came to me and said, well, you should sell the game. You should make it an actual board game. Like, a lot of parents were like, yes, dude, it's going to blow up. You got to, this, that, and the other, saying things. It obviously is more complicated than that. But I was like, all right. But then when I went to college, I went to IU Bloomington, I kind of chickened out, to be honest. Like, I remember I had a friend, like, I went to this retreat, and one of my friends was like, hey, like, what's that game in your trunk, the trunk of your car? Because I had the game. We got to play that. Like, we totally got to play that. And I totally just ignored him, and I was like, no, I don't really know how to play it. And it was like, I was just so insecure. Like, I didn't know how to ask people to play. I was, like, nervous about it. So, like, we just never played in IU Bloomington ever, which was just so sad for me, because, it was honestly the biggest wasted potential. I had all this momentum. I go to IU Bloomington and didn't get a single person to play. Like, it was honestly lame. That's how I was. But there's a lot that I learned in Bloomington. And so by the time I came back home is when we had Season 3 Gatekeeper that year, and that was the most hype season of Gatekeeper that we had. And like maybe like I think over the years I've become less hype myself because I've just seen things happen. I've just seen like every scenario that the game creates happen over hundreds of games played, but that's fine, So, that's why, and that's personally why I have the Gatekeeper League, because for me, what makes something hype now are the stakes. So, like, I might not be able to get as hype in a regular match, but I can certainly get hype if it's a grand finals in sort of situation, or like a championships and there's like a big role or something. But so that's why that's why for me that's important. Like the whole thing is about hype. The whole thing is about excitement. And anyway, and even the competitive side of things. So like there's two things. Another thing I like about the competition is like I do have that part of me that's like I want to be the best at something. I like to push things. I like games like chess because I like to see how far you can push like a system. Like where does it go? Like I like to. There's a sense of discovery about it. There's a sense of art that's about it. Creativity. You can finding new things and like creating new ways to move. And then I do like the tradition. Like there's like certain things in the game like just choosing the gate you want to attack, who you use your bonus on the first, like when you capture gate, how you use your bonus, what ability you use or whatever. Though just the simple like, it feels if there's like a comfort attached to it now, and you kind of fine tune that and it becomes something that is, you perfect those decisions over time. Like the way in chess, how there's like the openings, they have like a series of openings that are like the best. That's what I mean. It's like they've perfected each move in the game to a certain point. So anyway, all that goes into Gatekeeper, and with that, I'll kind of talk about my vision for the game, and yeah, so I'll just go. So last year, or 2 years ago, we started a company that was Gatekeeper LLC. That company still exists. And we were like, all right, it's time to turn Gatekeeper into a success. We just had season 3, and it was super huge. We had our awesome grand finals. Everything about it was fun. So we're like, all right, let's move forward now. Let's make a company. So we make the company, and actually we are making the company during season 3. So that is something to point out. So we're making the game. Season 3 happens. The championships happen. And we take the game to Gen Con. And the thought is like, and at this point we have these like super sick wooden boards, which I'm sure if you're watching the video you've seen, or if you're listening on Spotify, you check out our website, gatekeeper.games. You can see our like official tournament boards. They're like pretty sick. They're wood printed. I got them from a company called Midwest Graphics. But I had to make like 50 of them, so I spent like $5,000 on these like boards. So it was like a pretty big investment, but at the end of the day, it was like pretty sweet. So we take the game to Gen Con, and our big hopes and dreams is like we're gonna take it to Gen Con. A bunch of people are gonna buy it, and we're just gonna sell these boards, which was super naive of us because like what, like the board cost, like we didn't. The goal was to get the game out for like $50, and I went into it knowing nothing. Even though I went to business school, it's like I knew nothing about how to get things to market. Like I didn't know how to sell things like that, like how to mass produce things. It made no sense to me. It was like I was going in completely blind, just having no idea. Nobody had any advice for me, and like I said, like all my friends were kind of small town dudes who kind of, in the trades. they're not like marketing geniuses or anything, but that's the people who are on my team, and we're a couple of guys who like to get hype, so we're like, all right, guys, let's form a company, figure out how to sell this, and we have no idea what we're doing. So I basically drove over Indianapolis, all over Indianapolis, like every day, to different companies, printers, like design companies. I just talked to people and tried to find out how to make a product. And what I found out is that, well, I found a lot, but ultimately, you got to make your product in China, and I didn't. So I spent all this money on a board, and there's all these rules. There's all these rules to merchandising and stuff. Like, so for example, like if you want to sell something at a store, you have to have the right packaging. Like if you want to sell a board game at Target, it's got to fit in them. It's got to fit on the space. So Gatekeeper was super sick because the board was awesome looking. It had a huge table presence. Like it just looked cool. Like that's that simple. That looked cool, so people wanted to play it. It doesn't fit on the shelf at Walmart. Therefore, they're not going to sell it. It's that simple. That's just what it is. They're not going to put it in the board game section because it would take up too much space. The game costs too much money. It's like, not in the sense that people won't spend $200 for a game, because they will. But people who spend $200 for a game, that usually that game doesn't cost $100 to make. And let me see, is it I'm in my no. So there's that, right? So it's like, okay, so if I really want to, so like, what do I mean here? What I mean now is like people will make a game for like $2 and they'll sell it for 20. That's what I mean. They don't make a game for $100 and sell it for 200. If you're making a game for 100, if you're making something for 100, you're selling it for like 3 to 500, something like that. It's like, because you have to sell it to a wholesaler who sells it. So like, for example, if you make a game for $2 and you give it to a wholesaler, you're selling it to them for like $10, and then they're selling it for 20. So you're only getting $8 off that $20 product, and then you have to pay taxes. So you're getting like less than that actually. So, and then if you have some sort of licensing deal, like if you're working with another company, like say like you made your game and Hasbro took it and sold it, then they're getting all of that money, and you're getting like $1 after all the taxes and everything. So it's like of a $20 product. So you're getting $1 off a $20 product. That cost you $2 to make. So it's like that's the kind of margins that people are working with. And then with my game, that's so take that $2 game to $20. Instead, that's like, I don't know, like what, 200 would be like $5,000 or something like that. I don't know. If you were to use percentages, obviously I'm not being an expert. I'm not an expert or anything, but just with my experience with all this stuff, it's not practical. And then of course the shipping. The game is like 20 pounds, so like to ship it is way expensive. It's like $100 to ship it anywhere, and it's inconvenient, bulky, and it's just not practical for retail. And that really honestly is an interesting thing to think about, because that it's like what that means is that the only things that we get on the shelves are things that fit into a formula, right? So it's like, people don't make things by hand anymore. Things are made like everything's made in China, like mass produced, and there's a certain system that things go through, and like this manufacturing process or whatever, and then the idea the whole process. And if it doesn't fit into the system that exists, then it just doesn't happen. like you just have to do things on a local level, which is increasingly difficult when people don't do things locally because you have the internet. And anyway, that's why Gatekeeper was so successful at first, was because we were all in school together. So now I'm in college, everyone has a job, and I'm living in another part of the state, now a whole nother state, and it's like, whoa, okay, so now that doesn't work anymore because we're not local. Like, I'm not local, so I can't do the local thing anymore. So, and now I gotta move to this other system, or like trying to create a company, and it's like, well, this product doesn't work with the modern day system. So it's like we gotta change the product. But half of the product is just how it looks and feels. So it's like and so this became the problem. We didn't, I didn't know, again, I went to business school. I knew how to do art and stuff. I knew I was artistic, but I wasn't a talented artist in any way, digitally or on paint or anything. Like, I have paintings that I've done in art classes in school and stuff, but it's like nothing that, I would never be like I'm a great artist. So anyway, so I had a friend who was a decent artist, and her name's Brooke. I'll probably have her on the podcast at some point, but she did all the art on the original board, and we just, I don't know, man. Like I said, we sold about a third of the boards to people in the community, and maybe more. And then we just started giving the boards away. And that's a long story of how we got to there. But basically, we sold some of them. We didn't make the money back. We ended up having to pay that $5,000 out of pocket, which sucked. And of course, it was on credit, so that's a big, we had to pay interest on it. And we're having these matches. Well, anyway, no. So that was just a bunch of the problems we were having, right? And at the time, we didn't solve any of them. And I'll talk about what the solution is. So we didn't know what the solution was, and we started having our bi-weekly matches, and it was interesting because before every match we had like 15 people. It's probably like an average. Maybe like 12 was an average, but 12 people in someone's living room is a lot. And our biggest match had like 20 people, so like that's kind of the range. It was like 10 to 20 people. That's what we were used to. Now all of a sudden the bi-weekly matches were like 8, and that's still a lot, but it's like we were like 8 people, because you had to think, for us it was the hype. Like, we built this game to get hype, and then you can't get as hype with 8 people as you can with 20 people. Especially, and then if it's down to like 6 or 5 people, like, that's not getting us hype. Just in general, like, you don't have enough voices in the air. The energy in the room's not going to be as high. So the bi-weekly matches were naturally not as hype, and they just They didn't even really dwindle that much. It basically got down to like 6 people, and it was just hard to maintain. And then they just, I wasn't there. Ultimately, I wasn't there. And if I was there, we probably would have maintained them, and it would have been fine. But because I wasn't there, we had people who didn't have any stake in it, running it. In the sense of, like, they didn't lose any. It was just kind of a time. Like, it went from something that was fun for them to something that was now a time, like a job. And that's like that's not any good for them, I guess. So, we had to stop running them. So then it just came down to like events, and that's kind of where we're at now. It's like, so now we have big events planned, and people go and they get hype, but it's like, it's just not as consistent. And for me, I ended up, I almost finished college. I went from business school to political science, and I did an internship with the government, the city government, and then I went over to now I'm doing theological studies and ministries, and I'm going in the ministry, which is another huge long story that I'm actually not going to get into at all. But the point now, I live in New York, right? So now I moved across the country. So moving to New York, we have our. I got over my fear that I had when I lived in Bloomington, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna start having matches. So I like it took me longer than it should have, but I finally started inviting a bunch of dudes over. That we all play every week, which has been really great, and it's a lot of fun. Now, it is interesting because like it isn't as hype, and it's more competitive, and it's more consistent too. We play every week, which is the most we've ever played. So we play every single week. It's very competitive. There's a lot of strategy like thought that goes into it. But there's not as many because that, competition ultimately I think is intimidating to people. And it's kind of like, how are you going to, like before, the reason we got new players, it wasn't the competition, it was the hype. So if we're getting hype, then everyone wants to come. But now we're like in this place where it's like, well, we have a nice little competitive league here. We got a like little group of guys, and we want to grow that. But it's like, where do we go from there? Like, what do we do? Well, the nice thing that's been happening is I've vastly improved my illustrator and just my skills like in art and drawing in general, and I've been able to make way nicer, high quality cards, which has been really cool. So my graphic designing has been getting better to the point where I think I could pass it off as professional, and I basically, although I've never capitalized professionally on any of the things I've learned in college, whether it be Excel, spreadsheets, and government, and education, all these like teaching and stuff like that, all these things I studied for like literally a year or more, and then didn't go into. I have come to places where I'm starting to all my skills have or in the art and stuff, it's my skills have come to a place where it's now all of a sudden becoming very useful. So obviously with business, I started the company. A lot of my stuff I learned in business and accounting and stuff came to use there. And in art and stuff, it's like finally the art's good enough that I can make assets myself. But now what am I trying to get to here? Essentially, we came to a place here in New York, and I would say this is where it is now. It's like we have the ability to market ourselves, and especially if we put the time into, it's like we know we can get more players to come and stuff like that, and that's really nice, and we have something that's consistent. But we don't have that hype community that we used to have. It's just not as hype. And I think the main reason for that is just because we take the game so seriously with the competition. And before, it's like we started from a place of hype and then took the game competitively, but then in a new place, it's like we started with competition, and it's hard from with the competition to hype. So, it gets hype in a big tournament and stuff like that, but again, that's like the only time. So we're just trying to balance that out. We're just like trying to figure that out. In the meantime, we have a bunch of these expensive boards lying around. We have the skills to make something happen. So we're like, well, like, what's the next thing to do? So this is when I get into the next big part of the project. So originally, the Miss Cheek edition was the game that kind of spread it because it was something we played in school and in class, and everyone had so much fun playing it that it was just like it was just a very fun game, fast paced game, and it made us want to play. And it helped get people from school come play at my house, because we'd play that game at school and then we'd play the bigger version at my house. So that was my thought was like, well, if we want the game to be hype again, we just have to go back to the roots. So I remade Gatekeeper Miss Cheek Edition, and I printed it out and laminated it, and I started playing at school, and one of my friends, Presley, actually started coming because of that. So literally exactly how it used to be. And my friend Thomas, he says he wants to come. He says he's gonna come, but then something happens every week or whatever. I don't know if he's gonna come. That's not a big deal. He plays Miss Cheek Edition with us. We have fun. So that's what that is. But essentially, we're like going back to the roots. And what I realized is like, we're trying to sell these big boards, which, by the way, now, because we're like, well, we really just want more people to know about Gatekeeper. We can't get people to buy these boards for $200 because everybody who wants a board already has one. And the Indiana League's no longer really expanding because people aren't, because I'm not there now. And then the New York League, well, actually, I probably could have sold a couple boards here, but because we were just giving them away in Indiana, I just gave them away here. So we still have more. But we're spreading the Gatekeeper name around, and like that. And anyway, so we're like, all right, we actually need to make a profit with this company, or we need to make some sort of money. So that's when I told this stuff. And if you're like not religious and you think I'm crazy for what I'm about to say, I mean, that's honestly fine. But you know what I mean? Like, I'm just gonna believe what I believe here. So this is what happened. I was telling my classmates. Actually, I don't even know if I was telling them. I don't know what exactly I was telling them. We did this thing in class where maybe I shouldn't say this. I don't know. Okay, basically, someone had a word for me, and a word that they felt like God wanted them to tell me, and essentially the word was that the financial turmoil in my business, which, I mean, it's not exactly turmoil, but that's not what they said. They didn't say turmoil. Basically said we're gonna find ourselves in a place of financial success, is what they said. And then I had a dream that I felt like was spiritual, that also seemed to say the same thing, indirectly. Again, it's I'm not gonna go into depth with either of those things, but just take it for what it is. And then I felt as if I needed to go find someone and talk to someone who had made a successful game, which should have been obvious to me to do that, but I felt like a spiritual nudge from God to be like, you got to go talk to this person. So I call up a company, and they've been helping me do what this whole podcast is about, which is a big Kickstarter. So essentially, and I don't want to hype up maybe I do want to. This Kickstarter is not going to be for Gatekeeper, the one we play in the tournaments and get hyped about. It's for the original version. Because the way the original version worked is it got people hype and it got people in. It made people want more. I feel that there's no better way to start get Gatekeeper started as a company than to put out a product that makes people hype and gets people, has people wanting more. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to do a Mrs. Cheek edition Gatekeeper starter pack. And we're not going to call it Mrs. Cheek edition, obviously. We're just going to call it Gatekeeper. But so we're working on this now. Truthfully, we only need 250 backers for it to be successful, which is light work. From all my research into Kickstarter, really seems not like not a lot of work, or actually a lot of work, but light work relatively speaking. So we're doing a lot of work, regardless if it's light work or not. But I'm fairly confident that we'll be successful in it. So okay, what this company's done for us is they've helped us get connected to China, so that all we have to do, basically, once we have all the assets, we can just give it to this company, and they'll get everything manufactured and shipped. Obviously, we need to have a successful Kickstarter first. But there's I think this is the genuine, because I had to ask myself, what do I want from this company? And because I have a pretty busy life. I'm a dad. I'm in school full time. I have 2 jobs right now, actually, but I'm working, and then I also do all this. So we basically had to decide to go, okay, I decided what I wanted from all this. How far do I want this to go? So my vision has always been, I want a bigger tournament, because my thing is I like to get hype. So what I wanted to do was have a big tournament where we had even 100 people who are all getting hype, going crazy over a crazy roll. That to me would be magical, and it's something that, to be honest, if I stayed in Indiana, I bet you anything, the tournaments probably would have got bigger and bigger and bigger. I bet. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think they would have gotten at least bigger, and we could have had 30 people, 40 people maybe. I don't know. I don't know what it would have been, but that's what it was. I was very driven before I moved to New York. I was getting a lot of stuff done with the tournaments. The tournaments were getting awesome. So, anyway. So so if we have the successful, the goal is, that's the goal for me, right? That's what I want. The other goal is to be able to play Gatekeeper more easily and more often, which means a video game, right? So it's what do you mean by that? Well, I'll get to that in a second. So okay, this is the vision. This is the plan. So we do the Kickstarter for the Miss Cheek edition. It's not really that difficult, a lot of work, but it's not going to be something that's super risky. We're fairly certain that's going to be successful. Once we do that, building off the success of the first Kickstarter, we want to do another Kickstarter for Gatekeeper Tournament Edition, which means we would do the game that we play now, we would do that game on Kickstarter, and we would just make a mass-producible version of it. So unfortunately, the table presence isn't going to be there. But of course, we will have this, insane, this, big board. I'm sure it'd fold up or something. And then with the 8-sided board on top, and people will be playing. So it can play the game like that. So it'll be pretty sweet. And then we'll just do that, right? And that game, and this is the reason why it matters, because Gatekeeper Miss Cheek Edition is a portable, cheap, fun to play game. We're not going to make a ton of money off of it, or something like that. And honestly, none of this stuff is something that I'm really thinking about, like, oh, like how much money can I make? It's more just like I can't make enough money on it to get to my end goal, which of course is the video game, which I'll explain again in a second. So Gatekeeper version 2, and let me actually, so I'm looking, let me start the Kickstarter page. So on Kickstarter, we, okay, so once we have the first one, then we go to the second one. The second one, obviously, manufacturing in China is not that expensive, so it's going to be like probably go from like a $2 game to like $5 to $10, and we're selling the game for like 50 to 100. Which I don't know if you know anything about Kickstarter games. It's really not that much, but the point is our margins get better, which means we can make a real profit, which means that we can invest into the game more heavily. So this is where and this is the territory of like we don't know if this is going to work out as well as we'd like it to. But I know we can get past the Miss Cheek edition part. So, and I did feel like sort of spiritually led to do this. So I'm, believing in the favor of the Lord. So that's what we're doing. So here we go. Then we have, so first we do the Miss Cheek, which is this. And by the way, on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, we have a digital Gatekeeper XL, which is obviously like I can my spreadsheet abilities are strong enough that I can make a working board game on Excel. So I made Miss Cheek edition on here. Anyway, it's not exactly the vision with the video game idea. So anyway, what was I saying? So we have to I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. After we have the second version that's successful, the hope is that we will have acquired a following and enough traction to then launch an online version, and that'd be the video game. And again, 1 second, but I'll get to that. Before we get into that, because okay, so you have the double Kickstarter play. That's like a big thing. But until then, what are we doing in the meantime while all that's happening online? Well, of course, there's the league. So we have our global rankings here. We've had 6 guys playing in New York, which has been pretty sweet each week. It's nice to have a consistent 6. In Indiana, there's also a consistent 6, but then we also have a bunch of other players who come as well. So that's the thing. It's like, so we're both, I think everyone who plays in New York plays pretty much every week, but like we just don't have as many outliers because I simply just don't know as many people because I didn't grow up here. And a lot of people from last season can't come for different reasons or the other. How do I explain? Season 4, Cameron can't come. Josh Torres struggles to come to matches and things like that. And then there's some other players and we've kind of cut off some of the teenagers who used to play because we're a little bit older, and I felt like it was irresponsible for a youth leader to bring kids whose parents trust me as their leader to these matches where there's kids who are guys who are in their later 20s and kind of I didn't want them to be swearing. Nothing happened or anything, but I don't want, if they're gonna swear or something, so we're just making sure that if I'm the leader of a student in church, because I'm a youth leader at church, that I'm not bringing students around stuff that is outside of church. So we just keep that separate. Last year, some of those students would get dropped off and stuff, and I've just basically like at the mall, not at my house, but like at the mall and stuff. So I've just told those, well, that's where we play at the mall, and I've just said like, no, like we're just not gonna. I just don't invite them anymore because I just don't want that. I just don't want anything strange to, you know what I mean. So I don't want anyone to like swear or something and then a parent get mad, something like that. So anyway, so we have the league in New York. Right now the goal is we just need to expand the league and bring it back to this place of hype and excitement. The competition has been great, but I really just want to get back to that feeling of hype and just pure like that, just that feeling. It was so fun back in the day, and I miss that, and I love the competition, but I think that the hype needs to be important for the game to grow, which ultimately will make the competition better. So like I don't care if there's like 3 people who win every game, but if we don't have that like base of hype, like that 10 to 20 players who come and like to get excited for hype rolls and comebacks and stuff, then there's no point. Not that there's no point, but then that's just a big part of why I like Gatekeeper, that'd be gone. So I think like that's part of our goal. We also have a bunch of events planned. I think 3 here and 3 in New York, 3 in Indiana, and the goal is just to get some hype events going. And this is just increased buzz. Then of course social media posts and stuff like that, whatever. I don't want to get too into the business side of the point. But the point is like we want to get these we want to have really sick hype matches in Indiana and in New York where people are just like going crazy. Next, and you can see like we're playing over at the mall. Some of the boys in New York. And again, if you're listening, I am specifically talking to the people on who are watching, if they're watching on YouTube. Okay, next, we got the documentaries. So the documentaries, we created the first one. It was really awesome. I feel like it was very successful. It probably is the greatest piece of work that I've ever created. I spent months on it. And I'm now going to do, and this was for season 1, so I'm going to do a documentary for every season. So I'll do season 2, season 3, season 4, and then at the end of the year I'll do season 5 documentary, assuming that it's hype enough. And then of course, so after we have all those documentaries, and we're going to continue the podcast. Ultimately, ultimately it's like, so like why documentaries, why the league? I would like to document the community and then build the community. I want to build the community. That's what I want. I find a lot of dudes, especially as they get older, they don't really hang out with people as much. They don't get along they just don't take time to have fun as much unless they're like drinking a lot of times. And it's like, I just want a good, wholesome, fun, unadulterated way for dudes to just get together and get hype on a, and that's what it is. That's what it is. And so I think, and so with that, with the documentaries, gives us something to talk about, helps build a bit of an online presence. With the podcast, same thing with the podcast. One thing I'm going to do is start having people who come up, guests we have on the podcast, start talking about themselves a little bit more, get more information about who they are and what they've done. Because I really want this to be about the players more than the game itself. Because that's really what matters. And ultimately, we're just going to build the community in person and online, and just build that sort of media, like social media hype, so that the second Kickstarter will be successful. And ultimately, if all goes well, then what we will have is hopefully enough money to pay a web designer to make something like, obviously not this high level, but chess.com. So chess.com is a website where you just go play chess with people online. What I want from Gatekeeper ultimately is a way where we can just get online and play Gatekeeper all the time. So it's like, because like for me, when I'm relaxing, like I don't have a good, I feel like there's not a great game that I can play competitively and or casually on my couch, like in every situation. Chess, the reason why chess doesn't work for me, and because chess could be that thing, is that chess doesn't really get as hype because chess is like super hard to be good at. Or Gatekeeper, even if you suck at it, you can still win. It's a game, like the best players win are the best because of percentages, not individual wins. You know, it's like a bad player can beat a really good player sometimes. You know, in chess you never win. So that's built, and it's because it's a dice rolling game. But that's part of what makes it fun. And if you have, and I really want to just make this space for us to just like get online and play the game, like when you're watching TV or when you're watching a movie, or like not in the movie theater, obviously, when you're on your PC or when you're at a restaurant or something, like any time where you'd be on your phone or you'd be on your computer or something. Like I just want that space to have an option for people to be in that space. I don't need to make the biggest website in the world, but I don't need to have as many players as chess.com, but like what I want to do is offer like a pro membership subscription for like $3 a month, $5 a month, whatever is reasonable. And then just when you pay for that, then you can just play ranked mode, and it gives you access to all the new cards and free, and like basically just give you all the content outside base game content for free. And then access to leaderboards and stuff like that. So of course, with that, what that does is, because how does this tie into like your dream of having like a huge tournament with like 100 players? Ultimately, what it does is we can take, so like let's say we have like 1,000 monthly users, who are paying the $5 a month and they're playing ranked. You just take the top 6 players or top 100 players, and you just send them an invite, or let's say even top 1,000 players. You just invite all the top 1,000 players to, because let's say we had 10,000 players, I don't know. So you invite all the top 1,000 players to come to a big event, and then that's just what it is. So then you have those people at the event. We play an in-person tourney, live stream it, and then boom, there it is. And it would be so fun. There'd be so much content, and like on the website, the same way chess does, we can have like a learn page where people can like learn stuff about the game. You could watch people live stream. We could do news about the championships and different things, like literally the same thing. Social clubs, forums, all these different things, coaches. We can do all this stuff with Gatekeeper, and it would just be so sweet. My favorite part, of course, I love leaderboards, I love stats, I love player comparisons, all that stuff, like looking at these head-to-heads and stuff, but like on with consistent data is going to be so sweet. So that summarized is the goal. Get these Kickstarters going, and we'll just move it along. But anyway, yeah, that is the podcast for today, and I hope you enjoy the vision, and I hope you support us and support the Kickstarter when we get to that. Thank you for listening if you listened to this part, but thanks. Have a good one.